Hey everyone, today's lesson is going to be over food chains and webs. And so our learning objective is we're going to analyze the flow of matter and energy through trophic levels using food chains, food webs, and ecological pyramids. So we're going to utilize what we've learned about already through trophic levels and be able to see how that applies to certain diagrams, which we'll look at here. So first we're going to start with food chains. So a food chain is just some sort of simple model that shows how energy flows through a system. If you remember when we talked about trophic levels, we said all of it deals with how energy is flowing, right? We only keep 10% of it and 90% is lost as heat, but food chains are just looking at how that energy is flowing. So the arrows represent a one-way flow of energy between the organisms. So if I look at this picture right here, okay, I mentioned that the sun is the basis of all energy. It provides energy to the grass. Okay. So this arrow is actually showing that the grass is receiving this energy. Okay. Then you have your first consumer, which is a grasshopper. Okay. The grasshopper is actually eating the grass, but the arrow is still pointing this direction because it's showing that they are gaining energy from the grass. Okay. And that's just going to continue on until you get here. Okay. The hawk is actually eating the snake, but the arrow still goes towards the hawk because they are receiving the energy on this specific food chain. And so food chains, like it says, simple models. So we're just looking at more of a linear connection between all of these things within an ecosystem. A food web, on the other hand, is going to look more like this. So now we're not just looking at one single chain, we're looking at how a bunch of different things are interconnected in some sort of ecosystem. So this represents the many interconnected food chains. So if I had 3 food chains together in an ecosystem, well, now I can combine them all into a web, right? And a web we know is super interconnected, which is what all of these lines are showing here. So in a food web, the producers only have arrows going away from them. So these things down here, the fungi, grass, shrub, and tree, you can see the arrows are all going away from them, right? Because their energy is actually being transferred to these other organisms. So this fungus, for example, when the squirrel eats the fungus, the energy is going towards the squirrel. Same thing with all of these. Wherever that arrow is pointing, the energy is going towards that specific creature. Heterotrophs can be placed in their trophic level based on how far removed from the producers they are. So this is the same thing as looking at that pyramid, now just in a slightly different way. If I look at this squirrel right here, okay, I just have to take an arrow and go backwards. Well, it's only one removed right here from this fungus. So that means this is a primary consumer because it is only one removed from that producer here. When I go up to a hawk, this one's a little bit more complex, okay? If I go this direction, I can go 1, 2 down to fungus. So this could be a secondary consumer, or if I take a different route, I can go down this one, and then this one, and then to here. So it could be classified as both a secondary or a tertiary, depending upon which way you are moving your lines. So in food webs, it's not always going to be as easy as this animal is only one specific level or trophic level. They could be a part of more than one specific level themselves. So for example, we're going to answer a few questions about this food web to see how that works. So we're going to first ask, what are the producers in this food web? So hopefully you were able to see, but the producers, remember, are the ones that the arrows are going away from. And I mentioned this. So you've got the fungi, grass, shrubs, and trees. So these are the things that can produce their own food, perform some sort of photosynthesis, or in the case of fungi, are just able to be eaten by something else. So the second question we're going to look at is, the rabbit is best classified at what trophic level? So look at that real quick and see if you can figure it out. All right, and this rabbit here, if we look at it, we've got to look at the arrows that are going towards it. So if I take these arrows and I go backwards, okay, I'm already to a shrub. Even if I take this one here and go backwards, it's to grass. So that means it's only one level removed from the producers. And if we go back to our trophic or biomass pyramids, if it's only one removed from the producers, that means this is my primary consumer. And then finally, which organisms could be classified as secondary consumers? So this question is going to be a little bit more complex because you're going to have to look at all of the organisms to see if they can be classified as that. So if we look at each one of these organisms, you have to see, can this organism go back to the producers and only have 2 arrows. So if we look at this squirrel, okay, we'll start here. This one cannot be a secondary consumer. Every single arrow going towards it, if I go back just one, it automatically brings me back to producers. So that is not going to work. Same thing with this grasshopper here and this rabbit. Now, if I look at the hawk, is it possible to be a secondary consumer? Yes, because if I go back to the squirrel and then the fungi, that is 2 levels removed. This shrew right here, if I go back to the grasshopper and then the grass, then this could also be secondary. The snake could also be secondary if I go back to rabbit and then the shrub here. This insect-eating bird, if I go back to grasshopper and grass, it could be secondary. Could the deer be secondary? In fact, this one cannot be, because you'll see there's only 2 arrows going towards it, and if you trace those back, they both go back to my producers, the shrub and tree. And then finally, the mountain lion. The mountain lion can actually go back 2 ways. I could go to the rabbit, back to the shrub, or to the deer and back to the tree or shrub. So all of these can be classified as secondary consumers, except for the squirrel, grasshopper, rabbit, and deer. So these 5 up here are all classified as secondary consumers. So that's all that I have for you for this lesson, and go explore further.